This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. It's the second week of July and still no state budget. That means Governor Malloy is running the state under executive order. The consequences are being felt by many, including nonprofits, which have scaled back services due to less funding. Other programs have taken a hit as well, including the state's summer youth employment program. Coming up, we'll find out how many teens this impacts statewide, and we're going to hear from a Bloomfield teen on the options left for him. But first, business and political leaders know Oz Griebel. For more than 16 years, he's led the Metro Hartford Alliance. It's a group focused on boosting investment to the region. But Griebel has announced he'll step down from the job at the end of this year. We wanted to know more about his decision and about the future of the Metro Hartford Alliance. What's it like working to sell the capital city in the region at a time when scrutiny of Connecticut continues to grow? Now, were you one of the many residents sharing that recent Atlantic piece titled, "What on Earth is Wrong with Connecticut?" on your Facebook wall? Well, Griebel's here with us in studio. We want to hear from you, too. Join the conversation this hour, 860-275-7266. Email wherewelive@wnpr.org. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Oz Griebel, welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here, Lucy. Thanks for having me.
So I understand Oz was not your given name at birth. It's actually Richard Griebel.
Right. Well, my middle name is Nelson, so those who go back to the 50s and 60s, the Ozzie and Harriet Nelson show is where that high school nickname started.
Certainly has a ring to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, we're talking about the Metro Hartford Alliance, a group that you have led for more than 16 years. For our listeners who are unfamiliar with this organization, tell us about your purpose.
Well, the purpose of the mission statement of the Alliance is to see that this region competes, and that's the word we emphasize, that we're competing aggressively and successfully for jobs, for capital, and for talent. And the region is defined pretty much as the 39 towns in the CROG definition of the region. But when you look at how small the state is, we are interacting with a lot of many other towns and many other organizations in the state. The goal by competing for jobs, capital, and talent is to ensure that this very high quality of life that we have remains that way, and that we remain a premier place, the state as a whole in this region, for all people. And again, to emphasize that word, all people, to live, play, work, start a business, and raise a family. That's our mission. We've been at it for 16 years, and our history is that we took a number of leaders back in the late 90s, took the then 200-year-old Chamber of Commerce and a economic development agency that had been spun out of it and put it back together again in 2001.
So you became the president and CEO at the inception.
Correct.
What's it been like for you these last 16 years? How have you seen your job and the mission of the Alliance change, if at all?
Well, a number of things that have been added, obviously with the support of many people, our investors foremost, our board of directors, and a very talented group of folks who work at the Alliance. And so things like HYPE started almost 11 years ago, Hartford Young Professionals and Entrepreneurs. The better part of 15 years ago, we launched the Connecticut Insurance and Financial Services Cluster. More recently, we've launched the Connecticut Health Council and Innovation Destination Hartford, which focuses on the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So there are a number of specific initiatives out there. At the same time, we've worked closely with DECD, with all three administrations, obviously including Governor Malloy, Catherine Smith there, along with the mayors of the city of Hartford and the political leaders in other towns to promote this region, specifically the region and the state overall, as a place in which an entity should expand if they're already here, retain the jobs that they're here, or relocate here and add jobs. So it's the ebbing and flowing of the economy obviously has had an impact on what we've done, but we've stayed true to that mission and to those specific initiatives to, again, make this region very appealing to the private sector.
Now, you mentioned HYPE, young professionals. When I think of this, I think of the millennials, the people that Connecticut wants to draw here
Right.
and keep here. What do these young professionals tell Metro Hartford Alliance about the things that are missing? Because we hear so often about needing more investment in our cities.
Well, sometimes it's very difficult to come up with, I think, broad generalizations about what people want. But I would start with the most basic, and that is people want jobs. They want the opportunity to take care of themselves, take care of their families, to grow, not just jobs that keep them maybe the shirt on their back for a period of time, but the opportunity to grow, to become more successful, to own a home, to do the things that I think every individual wants. I don't care whether you're a millennial or you're someone in their 60s or 70s. You want that ability to have to contribute and to have the financial wherewithal to do the things that you want. I believe that remains primary for everyone. Now, Many people will talk about the need for urban development, and I think that when you go back all the way back to the late 90s, when Governor Rowland was in office, Tom Ritter was Speaker of the House, Mike Peters was mayor of the city. You go back to that period right through Governor Malloy's tenure. Now, the city of Hartford, I think, is dramatically different than it was before. So there's been a lot that has gone on in the city. If you go down to New Haven and the leadership that Bruce Alexander, as part of the president's office down there in terms of renovating the city, of expanding retail operations and opportunities in the city, we have very dynamic urban areas, in my opinion. What we don't have is concentration, and we're 3.5 million, 3.6 million people. We're scattered from the Enfield, Suffield, up on the border in Massachusetts, all the way down to the Greenwich, Stamford area on the New York border, and then going east and west. So that 3.6 million people is not concentrated in a neighborhood or in a borough like you would find in New York or parts of Boston. So the idea of connectivity is important. At the same time, we want to be sure that we're emphasizing the great quality of life we have in our suburbs, because that is an important part to everybody. If you want differential in what differences in what you have to offer in terms of residential life. So all these things are part of making sure we do a hard analysis of what we're missing, but that we're also promoting the great asset base that we have here in Connecticut.
Let's talk about the advantages of living here. I did reference that the latest article that come out from a national publication looking at perceptions of Connecticut, what's
Right.
broken. It's just the drumbeat of negativity. What about this community? I mean, you were someone who worked and lived in Boston. You
Right.
came to Connecticut.
Right.
What about this community will keep people here? And the people that say they are leaving, how do you keep them here?
Well, on the front end of that question, why I came, and I think this is the reason was you had first of all, it was an opportunity they had to be when I was transferred down here by what was then Bank of Boston. But look, the more I stayed here, the more you realize that this is a great state and a great region in which one can make a difference. And when you talk to millennials, and when however you want to define a millennial, I take that all the way up to people in their 30s and early 40s. Many people want to be in an area where they can make a difference, whether that's in their volunteer activity, whether that's being involved in civic discourse, running for political office. The state offers tremendous opportunities either in the individual towns, the various organizations we have, and that's an important thing to a lot of people to say, yes, I have my job, and that's an important part of my life to keep my family keeping a roof over our heads and food on the table and having opportunities for education. But that sense of belonging, that sense of contributing beyond what I'm doing during the 40-hour or 50-hour work week I have is a very important element. So I think that's a great issue. The fact that you're between Boston and New York is a great asset. Your proximity to both is easy, or easy access up into the Berkshires and into western Massachusetts and what you have there, and then down on the shoreline. It's got a great sense of both that ability, that opportunity to contribute, but also your opportunities for a number of things that are really important in your quality of life, whether they be in Hartford, New Haven, whether that be in Boston or New York, along the shorelines or in the mountains.
You talked about the advantages, but let's talk about what's broken. We hear
Sure.
often that businesses feel like they just don't have confidence in the climate here in Connecticut. What are your members telling you?
It's exactly that. We've said for a long time that the single biggest challenge that we're facing collectively is that lack of private sector confidence in the state overall, and whether that be state budgets, municipal budgets, certainly the legacy issues that we have and unfunded liabilities both at the state and municipal levels, the challenge that the city of Hartford right now, for example, is facing is clearly an issue, and we don't ever put our heads in the sands on this. The fact that we couldn't the legislatures over almost 20 years now have not put definitions in the constitutional spending cap causes a lot of problems. When you look at the issues we're facing here today, some of them go back to the years when we were having surpluses in the late 90s and early part of the last decade, when the spending cap language required that surpluses would go into specifically into the pension fund itself, to the rainy day fund, or paying down debt. The numbers roughly were about $5.5 billion over a 3 or 4 year budget cycle. A big chunk of that went into projects, and only about $1.5 billion went into those three areas. So predictability is a word you hear a lot of. Governor Malloy mentioned predictability in his budget address back in February, and I think it's an important thing to focus on, because Well, tax rates and specific taxes impact individuals' views as well as private entities' views, business views. The predictability is almost more important than the rates. It's that idea of not being able to balance a budget. Balancing a budget by increasing taxes or instituting new taxes is what really stymies private sector confidence, is one obviously that the governor is focused on in this current budget as we're trying to wrestle this budget to ground over the next couple of weeks.
I'm speaking with Oz Griebel, President and CEO of the Metro Hartford Alliance. You're listening to Where We Live here on WNPR. Mr. Griebel is leaving his post at the end of the year after more than 16 years of heading up the Alliance. You have been a candidate in the past. Are you interested in running for governor?
Well, in the short term, my focus is on the Alliance. I have a responsibility to do that. I don't have any specific plans, and as I've said to many people, I think that running for office is certainly an option. I did it once before. I enjoyed the campaign concept. But being involved, whether it's through elected office or other ways of helping and collaborating with the many people in this state who are serious and dedicated to resolving the problems, to me is the most important thing that I'll be looking at as I get closer to the end of the year.
You obviously understand the economic challenges. You know a lot of people in the community. Do you want to be part of the solution by running?
Well, whether I run or not, I think I want to be part of the solution. And that to me is the most important thing because whether you run, if one runs, to state the obvious, one is not guaranteed to win. So to me, whether it's running for office, which I'll certainly look at, it's really staying involved in a meaningful way to build off and continue to work with a number of folks in this state, many folks in this state, as I said a minute ago, who are dedicated to resolving our challenges. It's also about promoting what we have. I do want to keep emphasizing that this is always a balancing act and making sure that we don't let the negativity overwhelm us. At the same time, you don't want to put your head in the sand and pretend that there aren't issues. But we are in a very strong position in the state. The foundation of our assets is strong. They're under attack, like they are in many other states. We're not unique in the fiscal challenges that we're facing. The city of Hartford's not unique in the fiscal challenges it's facing. Greater collaboration among all of us, whether they're organizations or individuals, greater collaboration, sustained collaboration between the private sector and the public sector is absolutely critical, and I look forward to continuing to play a role in that as I go forward.
A lot of attention when GE left Connecticut for Boston recently. Aetna's headquarters will be relocating to Manhattan. How does that put pressure on the work that you're doing? And again, when you say there's a lot of attention on the negative, and I've also said this earlier, but how do you get people's minds off that to work together to get more people at the table to try to figure out, well, how can we move this region forward?
It's a great question, and it's one that we certainly at the Alliance try to implement every day, whether that's working with the towns here in the 39 towns in the region. Most of what we've done, and I hope over time this can be expanded, is working with the private sector itself here, the Travelers of the world, the Aetnas, the Hartfords, the major employers, as well as the number of privately held entities we have here in the state. It's a great, one of our great strengths is not just the major publicly traded companies that are here, but also the many family-owned business, third and fourth generations entities that are here that are critical and employ anywhere from 50 to 500 people that sometimes don't have the same focus or the same publicity around how important they are is critical. So getting our organization to work together on public policy matters, or putting together things like HYPE and the Health Council and the cluster is all what we've done. And ideally over time, that kind of thing will occur where organizations like ours continue to work closely with the other metro chambers, with CBIA, so that we're promoting an environment that is going to attract private sector capital, private sector employment, and make this an area that, as go back to the first part of this conversation, a place where anybody, whether you're graduating from school today or you're in your 60s, if you want to work, you've got an opportunity to do that.
Today we're talking with Oz Griebel, again, President and CEO of the Metro Hartford Alliance. It's an organization committed to economic development of the capital city and the region. You can join the conversation, 860-275-7266. I wanted to take a call before we head to break. Mary is calling from Hartford. Mary, you're on the show.
Hi. You know, the green economy for environmental good has been an example of innovative growth it's flourished in so many progressive cities across America, especially during the Obama years when there was support for urban waters and urban environments. Why has Hartford and the municipal leadership, especially during the past 8 to 10 years, resisted support for green jobs, for the green economy that's often started with small nonprofits, with individuals, maybe not millennials, especially given Hartford and Connecticut's heritage of parks, of the Connecticut River, of the home of the native Frederick Law Olmsted?
All right, Mary, thank you for your question.
Well, I would, with all due respect to Mary, categorically reject the idea that people have resisted this and point out to things like riverfront recapture, which goes back to almost 30 years now, and how important the park system there is. The effort that's gone on underway in terms of keeping the Connecticut River clean that goes back over 40 years, the work that the MDC is doing on that. The renovation of Keeney Park recently, the iQuilt initiative that started almost 10 years ago under the leadership of the Bushnell and Doug Sussman coming in and renovating all the walking space around Bushnell Park. I'm sure we're not perfect, but I would say there's been a tremendous focus on understanding the importance of, I don't know what the green economy specifically means, but the idea of having clean air, clean water, vibrant cities, how they all fit together, I think has been part and parcel of several agendas, both three governors as well as all the mayors that have been in office since I've been here. A lot can continue to be done, but I think there's a tremendous focus on how important parks and clean water and clean air are to the quality of life, and ultimately how important that is to the private sector to want to invest here. Because if you're not going to have a quality environment for employees, private sector isn't going to stay here or expand here.
You mentioned iQuilt. I just wanted to ask you, with the city's financial problems, a lot of those plans, and I believe you helped work on some of that, how delayed will some of those initiatives be?
Well, a big chunk of the original iQuilt initiative around the Tiger Grant that was put in place almost 6 or 7 years ago, all that work around the park, a lot of that is done. And so it's a great, the straightening of Gold Street and that linkage, what Travelers has done with its plaza outside of the tower, what Phoenix did in renovating the space around its building about 5 years ago. There's a tremendous different looking city in that part of downtown. You've got the work on Albany Avenue starting. The streetscape is underway now. I believe all the funding, at least for that part of the streetscape, is locked in. There's no question that every entity, whether it's federal, state, or local, is going to faces today significant. We as a country face significant challenges to our infrastructure, and whether that's repairing the infrastructure or doing something new, whether that's additional train service, whether it's streetscapes like Albany Avenue, whether that's the repair or replacement of I-84, all those things are facing significant fiscal challenges. And so you've got the Trump administration talking about what it's going to do or not going to do on infrastructure investment. We've got Governor Malloy has led a strong focus in the last during both of his terms, along with Jim Redeker, the Commissioner of DOT, about how what we need to do in the transportation area and what we need to do on funding for that. So these are debates and questions that have gone on, and we have to all stay engaged to make sure that we do have a funding source, that when federal money is available, we can match it, or when we're taking on initiatives on our own in the city or the region, that we're able to fund them. That's a critical issue for all of us to deal with.
This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We're speaking with the president and CEO of the Metro Hartford Alliance. He's stepping down from that job at the end of this year, but we wanted to get his take on how to continue to grow this region and a city when there's a lot of scrutiny and perception, negative perception of Connecticut these days. After the break, we're going to ask Oz Griebel about his reaction to Hartford exploring bankruptcy, and we'll take more of your calls too. What does the private sector need to see and hear to restore confidence in the capital and the region? Join the conversation, 860-275-7266. This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. The Metro Hartford Alliance focuses on economic development in the capital city and its region. In studio with us today is the organization's president and CEO, Oz Griebel. He's stepping down from the job at the end of this year after more than 16 years. You can join the conversation, 860-275-7266. I wanted to ask you, Oz, about news that Hartford is exploring filing for bankruptcy. What would that mean for the region?
First, let me just emphasize the great respect that we have for Mayor Bronin and not only the candid analysis that he's put forth from the time he took office, even during the campaign of prior to that, and the number of very talented people he's brought in. There's a lot of activity going on in the city, and I will answer the question of bankruptcy, but I do want to be sure that we're focused on the growth in the city. I mentioned some of the things how downtown is different today on the riverfront recapture side. You've got more housing units that's going back to that 99-2000 period. Governor Malloy and CERTA, the Capital Region Development Authority under Suzanne Hopgood and Mike Freemuth, have taken a big lead on that. You've got the Yukon campus moving downtown, and while the financing of the stadium is a challenge, the fact that you've got a AA ball club down here now and it's creating a certain buzz is significant. So one of the things as the mayor, city council, and those of us in the private sector have looked at the challenges that the city's facing, it's been on that basis that a lot of good things are going on in the city. So how do we create the structural reform that is needed to give not only the private sector confidence that that the city has its fiscal house in order and it's worth putting time in here, but at the same time, actions that are needed to take the mill rate down, because the single most important thing you'll be able to generate private sector confidence will be a projected steady decline in that 74-75 mill rate down to something that's much more competitive. So with all that in mind, the mayor last year sought essentially some state protections that would have allowed, was under Senate bill, I think it was number 464, where he was looking for additional authority to address some of the issues both on the union side, union negotiations and otherwise. That bill did not get passed, and so there's been a series of discussions that he's led, obviously, on additional state financing and potential state takeover or something along those lines. And then ultimately, if the budget there is no budget, or budget continues to go out, the state budget continues to go unadopted for a period of time, or there's not significant financial issues in there, I think the mayor is doing and has been doing from the beginning a very thoughtful, deliberate approach to what the options are. And right now, these options are shrinking dramatically to at least bankruptcy being on the table. The engagement of a law firm with restructuring and legal experience is important. I think the single most important thing about whatever the next set of actions are is that it be done in strong collaboration between the mayor, obviously the state, and the private sector. So you have Aetna, the Hartford, and Travelers making a commitment of up to $10 million a year for 5 years if certain structural, comprehensive and sustainable structural reform occurs. I think the idea that if bankruptcy has to be pursued, then there has to be a plan in place that has all the relevant parties together. Simply going and filing for bankruptcy, we've been very clear on this. That makes no sense to us because of the uncertainty that goes with a bankruptcy filing, the costs associated with it. But if we're joined at the hip and all the parties are allowed to, yes, this is the reset button that we need to hit for Hartford, then I think bankruptcy, notwithstanding some of the serious concerns about public relations issues, that if it's done in a partnership with all the relevant parties, that may be the one way we can go to begin to attain that structural reform that we know we need in Hartford. And, oh, by the way, there are a number of other municipalities that are going to be in similar situations in the near term for similar reasons.
But you mentioned the public relations disaster going into bankruptcy would be, that would deflate any kind of momentum trying to get businesses to come here?
No, I think that's why I'll just emphasize again. It's one thing for the mayor on his own, if you would, or the city council together to go and file for bankruptcy. As opposed to, imagine the hypothetical press conference when this occurs, that's surrounding the mayor and the governor and whoever else is at this hypothetical press conference. You have the leaders of this region in the city, both on the private sector side as well as those who are important civic leaders in the area. It's important that that what we do, whatever we do, it be done in a collaborative way. It's, somebody said to me one time that it's kind of a situation where every ox has to be gored equally, and there is going to be sacrifice here. No matter, we're already in the sacrifices are already being absorbed by residents, by others. I mean, I know you're going to have a discussion around summer jobs, which impact not just Hartford. So there's a series of sacrifices that are already being made, but taking the aggressive step, leveraging the significant intellectual talent we have here in the city, the significant financial resources that we have, doing that together is critical. However, whatever the next step is to solving Hartford's problem, it happens to be.
We've had Mayor Bronin on the show before when he was doing this tour of the suburbs,
right,
talking about why there needs to be a greater investment and support of the capital city. You know that some of the suburbs are resistant to that. They feel like Hartford gets a lot of support and it hasn't been used wisely.
Well, again, the issues when you have the reductions in municipal aid of the type that everybody is facing, it's very difficult to put your hand up either as a legislator or as a elected official in your town and say, oh, by the way, not only are we going to take a cut and have to raise our own property taxes, we're willing to put some additional monies into one given area, other municipalities. I mean, I think politically it's extraordinarily difficult to imagine anybody who's in that situation raising their hand to do that. There are issues that we need to deal with at the state level that have an impact on the municipalities. There's issues, I think, that we have to deal with at the regional level. The whole notion of greater regional integration of services has been on the table for all the 25 years I've been here. We've made marginal progress on it. Under the theory that you don't want to let a good crisis go to waste, this might be the type of fiscal environment. First of all, I think people are talking about things on a regional basis more so in the last 2 years than I've heard in the prior 20. And how that plays out over the next, not only this budget cycle, but more importantly the future, the budget cycles after that, starting after the 2018 election, I think are going to be very important as to how do we go about in a state this small, notwithstanding the great pride we all have in local government, how do we work together more effectively so that services can be shared, property taxes can be controlled in all the municipalities, and we can get the quality of services that in all of our areas that we all want.
So you're saying, given the budget crisis that the state and the city are facing, this could be the catalyst where the towns are seriously going to be thinking about regionalization?
Yeah, I want to be regionalization is one of those words that you get. If you ask 5 people what their definition is, you'll probably get 10 different definitions. I think the notion, in the most simplistic way, is when you look at the amount of tax dollars, state and property tax dollars, that go into municipal services, you have to ask the question, as an elected official, as a resident of a town, are we doing this in the most efficient way possible? Are we using the dollars that we all pay individually and through business taxes in the most efficient way so that both the quality of services and the cost of the services are done in the most practical approach? And I think, as I said a second ago, there's more conversation along these lines without necessarily specificity than I've heard before. And I think it does open up an opportunity to have more serious, specific discussions as we go forward.
I wanted to talk more about transportation because when we look at the region, I mean, anyone who talks about rush hour leaving Hartford, or when you're over on I-84 West, how there's so much gridlock. I mean, you sat on the Governor Malloy's Transportation Finance Panel. You were chair of the Transportation Strategy Board until 2006. You mentioned funding can be problematic. Right. So how do we get a solution where we have less cars on the road? Mary had called earlier talking more about investment and green infrastructure. And I'm just curious what the plan could be for this region that is facing gridlock.
Well, a couple things. One is that it's not as if nothing has been done, and I'll just point to Connecticut Fast Track as one of those examples. That was hotly debated topic. Governor Malloy made the decision early in his administration to move forward with that project. And I don't have the statistics there, but clearly the idea of linking New Britain and Hartford over that 9-mile stretch provides an option that we didn't have before. I think under Jim Redeker's leadership and his team, There's much more integration of bus service now, so Connecticut Fast Track isn't just that 9-mile stretch, but really is the whole bus service options that are there. This is not an area that is used to mass transit, though. We don't have mass transit in our DNA the way you would see in other major urban areas, and you don't have a subway option or other fixed rail along those lines. So the bus service is the one thing we offer, and yet I would say that, and I'm clearly in this category, no one wants to give up their independence when it comes to their commute. I want to leave my house when I want to leave my house, and I want to leave my job when I want to leave my job, and I really don't want to be bothered with all these schedules. I think the fact that there's been more aggressive marketing by DOT on this is helpful. On the funding side, hats off to a number of people in the legislature, to Governor Malloy, for suggesting we have to look at the funding options, because no matter what we want to do here in terms of either repairing road systems, and you cannot take your eye off the fact that roads are still the primary way we get around in Connecticut, whether we're repairing roads, having some kind of expansion, replacement of I-84 to maybe provide some additional space in the city of Hartford if you use either the current DOT plan or the concept that Congressman Larson has put forward. Those are all going to require money. Most of it's 80-20, 80% dollars coming from the federal government, 20% match. So if you're looking at just picking numbers out of the air, if you're looking at a $5 billion project, whatever that is, we in the state of Connecticut, we as taxpayers have to come up with $1 billion. And when you have a decline in the gasoline tax, the amount of gasoline tax that's collected, in part because we are moving as a country to more green economy, more hybrid engines and the like, maybe not as fast as some would like, but nonetheless, that's where the world is headed. And has been headed for a while, then where is that funding source going to come from? Whether it's electronic tolling, whether it's the idea of vehicle miles traveled, we're going to have to use technology to do that. And I understand the resistance, but I also think that there's almost a theological opposition to some of these issues because they're not politically palatable. And yes, can DOT be more efficient? I'm sure they can be. Can we continue to look at other ways of creating funding sources? But there are some fundamental questions that we're beginning to wrestle with in this current session, over the last couple of sessions that came very close to passing in this current budget session. They're going to have to continue to be on the drawing board if we're going to be able to fund whatever transportation improvements we think are appropriate.
You mentioned tolls. Is that something that Connecticut should seriously consider? It was brought up a few times this session.
We've going back to the Transportation Strategy Board in the early part of last decade. Those folks with whom I've worked have said that electronic tolls have to be looked at, and I want to keep emphasizing electronic tolls. If you're anybody who's traveled the Mass Turnpike over the last however long you've traveled it, but in most recent time, when you now get on the turnpike, you've got all the overhead readers, that awful gridlock that used to occur at the intersection of 128 and the turnpike, while it's still going to be there, is definitely eased out. So there are technologies today that some people are concerned about the Big Brother aspect of Easy Pass and others, but that's the reality that we're living in, and the fact that you can have flexible control over the tolls. You may toll at a higher amount during rush hour versus that. So you cause people to go at different times of the day. So every day I've gone in at 8 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But gee, now we're going to put electronic tolls in, and it's going to be cheaper for me to go in at 10 and leave at 7, or go in at 6 in the morning and leave at 3. You may change your patterns both in terms of the impact that has on the climate, less people being stalled in congestion, and others. So this all has to be part of the discussion, and it is part of the discussion. Getting it implemented is what I believe needs to be done at some point in the future. Otherwise, we will face the fact that our special transportation fund will be effectively out of money sooner rather than later.
We're almost out of time. Oz Griebel, again, he's president and CEO of the Metro Hartford Alliance. For more than 16 years, he's leaving the post at the end of the year. I wanted to just ask you again, just to go back to the fact that the state, the General Assembly has yet to pass a budget. How problematic is that for the private sector when they see that the state lawmakers are still having trouble trying to get their fiscal house in order?
I would just go back to the comment I made earlier about private sector confidence, and the idea of predictability is to me, however broadly you want to define that, in the most simplistic terms, the idea that people can see that there is a process that will come to a conclusion, that the funding needed to support the services is predictable in terms of the types of taxes and the rates at which those taxes are implemented are absolutely critical. And I do believe that there are so many people in this state. I've said many times that the greatest asset we have in this state is the intellectual capital we have, the extraordinary number of people who are bright, innovative, willing to collaborate, committed to the state of Connecticut. Not everybody is leaving the state of Connecticut. There are many people who want to stay here, and I think the more that we can work together to address these issues collaboratively, the better off that we're going to be. And certainly at the Alliance, we've had the benefit of an awful lot of smart people leading the organization. Romney Iyer, who at the time was the CEO of the Hartford, was our first chair. We've been blessed with a number of chairs, very capable people who've succeeded Romney. Andy Bissett at Travelers is coming back into that role, having served as chair back in the 06 to 08 period. So the idea of where does the Alliance play its role in pulling people together so that we take full advantage of the intellectual capital and the great sense of what I'll call a moral imperative to do the right thing for all the residents here is a combination of resources, a combination of attributes that we want to fully leverage. And I know that the Alliance will continue to do that as we go forward, and I look forward to playing an appropriate role in another venue to also help in that way.
One more. We often hear from small business owners they don't feel like the state of Connecticut is doing enough to help them. Obviously, the big push to get bigger companies, corporations to stay here and to come to Connecticut. What can the state do better to help small business owners around the state?
Well, there's been a very robust small loan program for small businesses that DECD oversees under Governor Malloy's leadership. So you've had that certainly over the last 7 or 8 years. You've had a greater focus under Connecticut Innovations and CT Next to spur innovation and entrepreneurship. So the recent award to the East Hartford application for Innovation Places, $2 million that will come into this group. Again, different people, different entities coming together to work to create an environment for startups and second stage companies. I don't think there's a single organization, the Alliance and other chamber and other similar organizations, that isn't focused on this whole area of stage 2 companies and startups. I think there's a lot going on. I do think that small business, like larger businesses, publicly traded businesses, also have concern about the predictability in state budget, what changes will occur. So while it's a little different from a larger employer, publicly traded standpoint, I think the issues that any private sector entity faces, whether it be business, hospitals, large, small, are the same. And the more that we can, as I said, work together to resolve the problem, the fiscal issues, knowing that these resolutions are going to probably take a decade in many cases, but you're laying a plan out that people can see where we're going, both at the city and municipal level, is absolutely critical for entities of all sizes.
Oz Griebel, President and CEO of the Metro Hartford Alliance, again until December when he steps down from the post after 16 years. I have to ask, Oz, you're not moving to Florida in December, right?
Oh, I'm staying here. I'm one of those people I'm with Connecticut all the way.
Good to hear. Thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up, state budget troubles hit a program meant to pair teens up with summer jobs. We'll hear more after the break. This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Summertime means summer jobs for teens, but for some Connecticut youth who had jobs lined up through a state program, they've recently received news those jobs have fallen through. What's the impact? To tell us more, we're joined in studio now by Jim Boucher, Chief Strategic Officer at Capital Workforce Partners. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lucy.
I'll just get a little closer to the mic so our listeners can hear you, Jim. Before I ask you a little bit more about the summer employment program, tell us about Capital Workforce Partners and what you do.
Sure. So we're the state's regional workforce development board in North Central Connecticut. And Capital Workforce Partners, we help individuals overcome barriers to employment, and we close the gap between skills and business hiring needs. So for youth employment, it's a critical program where we're trying to make sure that young people have all the opportunities to get into career pathways that are needed for employers in the region and the state.
So you say North Central region, so Hartford, and then how many towns?
About 37 municipalities in the capital region.
We invited you on to talk about the state summer youth employment program. Tell us about how long this program has existed and exactly what kind of jobs these teens are paired up with.
Sure. So the Summer Youth Employment and Learning Program has existed probably for at least 3 decades or more. And generally speaking, it is the main opportunity for many young people, particularly in distressed communities who have challenges finding job opportunities in their communities, to get summer employment, which is usually about 120 hours throughout the summer. And it provides a significant amount of work experiences that young people might not ordinarily get. We're finding that youth unemployment can be as high as 40 to 45% in many of the distressed communities. And so this is an opportunity for young people to get future success opportunities and structure.
When you talk about these jobs, what kind of jobs?
So it ranges both public and private sector. So generally, young people are placed on work sites where they have adult mentors and supervisors, and it can range anywhere on the private sector side from healthcare to retail to a number of other opportunities. We're even now looking at advanced manufacturing, where some young people are getting some exposure to, which is critical for the state. And then on the nonprofit side, we have a number of programs that really are looking at young people who become youth development specialists and working with other young people at camps and other programs. So when we see a loss in summer jobs, it also has an impact both on the business community and also on nonprofits who are looking for additional capacity to support youth activity during the summer.
So I understand that traditionally the state funded about $5.5 million statewide for this program. I think the governor's proposal was to half that. And so now that there's no budget, how many teens are we talking about that aren't going to be able to work, Jim?
So in the region, that's probably about 400 young people that will not have opportunities this summer because there has not yet been a budget passed. In Hartford itself, we still have about 600 young people that will be supported through both the city of Hartford, where the mayor and city council has put $1 million forward, and also the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving provided about $406,000 for supports. So regionally, the biggest challenge is that many of the municipalities outside of Hartford only have the state dollars for summer youth employment programs. So we're seeing programs canceled throughout the region. And in the city of Hartford, we have a reduced program. Statewide, that also probably equals about anywhere about 1,000 to 1,500 young people who will not have summer jobs unless something immediate happens.
One of those young people is Kamai Harris. He lives in Bloomfield. He's 16 years old, and he's on the phone with us now. Kamai, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about you and what job were you slated to have through the Summer Youth Employment Program?
I'm going into my senior year at the age of 16, and I was working with the Center for Latino Progress last year, and
what were you doing for the Center for Latino Progress last year, Kamai?
I was making code. Well, I was learning how to code for apps using MIT App Inventor, and then that was one half of the day, and then for the second half, our instructor had taught us how to budget daily life things and save for college.
And you were supposed to have a job this summer. When did you hear that that was not going to happen? And was that where would you have worked?
Huh?
Kamai, you said that you were slated to have a job this summer. So where were you going to work? And when did you hear that that wasn't going to happen?
I heard that wasn't going to happen last week, and I was going to work at the same I don't know what it's called, but I was going to work at like the same place I worked last year, the Center for Latino Progress.
Mm-hmm. So what happens now? Are you going to try to find work somewhere else? And what kind of jobs are out there for you, Kamai?
Well, I'm still going to apply for different jobs, but now I'm still going to participate in the program, but I'm just not going to get paid for it because, I want to still get a learning aspect from it.
Mm. So we're hearing, Jim, that Kamai is learning some skills that you wouldn't necessarily learn at a Dunkin' Donuts, coding, learning about how to budget. These are skills that these students, again, wouldn't be learning at typical jobs. Can you talk more about the impact of people like on Kamai?
Yeah, I think Kamai speaks really well to the importance of having this kind of opportunity. So a lot of young people are gaining, sort of what we would also refer as career preparation, work readiness, but also specific skills needed by industry in the area. And I think one of the things that is happening is of interest, I think, is that both the governor, the legislature, local leaders, and foundations see the importance of this program. And this was, I believe, actually in everyone's budget, but not having a budget passed is now leading to this. But we also see the importance of adult mentors, and often these jobs will last beyond, even the summer and into the future. And other skills like customer services, in this case, computer literacy, financial literacy, all of those are critical for the future talent pipeline. I know you had Oz Griebel on a few minutes ago, and we literally have thousands of job openings in the region right now that require a talented workforce. And so these summer jobs really lead to supporting those businesses, getting those job openings filled. And so this is a critical also economic development for the sort of long-term future for business and industry, as well as we know summer jobs lead to the future success of young people in their post-secondary experience and then gaining a job.
Kamai says that he'll still be able to be at the Center for Latino Progress, but just not get paid. But what about some of the other teens who are, they need that paycheck, whether to help save for college or maybe help their family? How does that impact them when, a lot of the service jobs out there are taken by college students and even older adults?
Yeah, I think this really does point to the need to have this kind of a structured program. We have seen literally over the past, decade to 2 decades, particularly young people in distressed communities who are having a significant challenge finding job opportunities. And as we look at the importance of linking both jobs and also people's education and also their business exposure, this is really critical for many young people in particularly distressed communities. This is the only job that often they are able to apply for various reasons. So this is a very important program.
We've heard from the General Assembly that they're going to try to pass a budget, I think July 18th. What does that mean for the program? So if they were able to pass a budget that would restore some of the funding, could these students still get the jobs and be paid before school starts?
So on one hand, the clock has almost run out, and we have had to notify regional programs that they've been canceled, mainly for the fact that young people need to know that they probably need to search elsewise for employment. At the same time, in Hartford, the program has been reduced. But if the state does come through, I'm sure that we will try our hardest to figure something out.
And this all comes during the summer when kids need things to be doing, especially in a season where you see crime go up.
And that's another major, I think, issue that we see with youth employment is that it oftentimes provides opportunities to avoid negative situations. And that includes, youth violence and other kinds of challenges that happen too often. And the issue of poverty and the need for young people for resources that often support their family, support their interest in going to college. All of those programs are really critical. And we also, speaking of the state budget, I think the hope here is that they will indeed support this program because we have other opportunities throughout the year. So should the summer time clock reach a point where we're into August and we're still needing to think about youth employment, there are school year, opportunities beyond summer to assure that young people are getting these kinds of structured work experiences linked to their education and linked to their future career pathways.
Well, I want to thank Jim Boucher. He's Chief Strategic Officer at Capital Workforce Partners. Thanks for coming in today, Jim.
Thank you very much.
And also Kamai Harris, who is on the phone from us, a 16-year-old from Bloomfield, headed into his senior year. Good luck to you, Kamai. We hope you find a job.
All right, thank you.
Our show is produced by Lydia Brown and Jeff Tyson. Our technical producer is Kian Wolf. WNPR's executive producer is Katie Tolarski. You can learn more about Where We Live at WNPR.org/wherewelive. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Thanks for listening.